So to recap, I got Celtics Raptors wrong, I got Heat Bucks wrong, and then I got Celtics Heat wrong. So let's predict another series. All the credit in the world to Miami, but let's be honest with ourselves, if the Lakers don't win this series, that's a disaster on their part. I think the first thing for Miami, before we dive into the matchups, play calling, all that stuff, they can't beat themselves at all. The things that I said about Denver apply to Miami as well. We saw against the Lakers, sure, if AD doesn't hit that buzzer beater, maybe it goes 6 games, but the Nuggets beat themselves. Like, Jokic had a lot of bad fouls, and Miami can't have that. The transition defense has to be good. The turnovers and the fouls need to be down. They can't get killed on the offensive glass. And even with all that, I still think they need to get a little fortunate with their shooting and the Lakers' shooting not being as great. If all of that happens, then they've got a shot to offset LeBron and AD. Now if we talk about the specifics. So the first question that I have for every Lakers series is 2 bigs, 1 big, as in just Anthony Davis at center. What's going to be the option? Well, if you go with AD on Bam, then you have a better chance of guarding the Bam handoff plays with Hero and Robinson, and you've got a better chance of guarding the Dragic-Bam pick and roll. But then it's the other big guy on probably Crowder, and then Miami would get that guy involved in handoff plays and stuff, which you could view that as a win, right? I mean, if Miami is taking an extra 4 or 5 possessions a game that could have been a Bam play that is now a Crowder handoff play with someone to try to get the other big just moving laterally on the perimeter, then you probably still view that as a victory, even if they still make it a couple times. The other thing with AD on Bam is I'd give AD a better chance of keeping up with Bam when he's going off the dribble and stuff. I mean, the way we saw Bam at times beat Tice off the dribble or Grant Williams or Jaylen Brown. Well, with Jaylen, it was more he was just bigger than him. AD is probably going to be the best option to slow that stuff from Bam down. And he can get a better contest on Bam than we saw the Celtics be able to do. So maybe that's the right option. The only thing I would think about is if Dwight is on Bam or JaVale, they could match up with him physically. And it could also just save some energy for Anthony Davis. And it would also allow AD to free roam a little bit more. And maybe that's what you really want out of him. But maybe AD on Bam is just the way that the Lakers are going to play it. And that's going to be that. And then it's going to be a question for Miami of, can you score on Anthony Davis through Bam? I think with the alternative of JaVale or Dwight on Bam, I think Bam can beat those guys off the dribble. Now, maybe you're still okay with that, with the idea being we're just going to sag off and dare Bam to take some shots, but Bam a lot of the time starts from around 17 feet or whatever, and when you're that close in already, I feel like it's a little tougher to sag off on a guy because he only has to take like 1 dribble and he's basically shooting a layup. I mean, AD, I think, can keep up with those handoff plays, and he can kind of give Hero or Robinson like a little bit of trouble on those, a little bit. It's still tough to do both. But even if he sometimes has to commit a little too hard to those guys because the initial dude who was guarding one of those guys, or Jimmy or Dragic in this scenario, gets beat, then you've still got Dwight or JaVale to help out, assuming the Lakers are playing 2 bigs in this scenario. And those guys can give Bam problems, but also LeBron can bring help as well. Now, of course, with that type of thing, other guys could then be open on the help, and we'll have to see how the Lakers can do with closing out to shooters and making Bam uncomfortable in moments like that to where he can't just get the pass off to his guy immediately. I think in opportunities like that, it would make sense for Miami to try some cut plays as well, especially with Jimmy. And we'll just have to see what happens there. I would give the Lakers a better chance than anybody Miami has faced up to this point. And I say that because they've proven each step of the way that they can do that. I mean, against the Rockets, it was 1 big trapping and closing out on shooters. Against the Nuggets, it was more physicality on Jokic and LeBron on Murray. So at this point, I'm just like, all right, what's next? What's the next adjustment the Lakers need to make? And they've got it right each time so far. Now, as far as other things Miami can run, like Jimmy, for example, just things Jimmy's going to do, the ISOs, the post-ups, the pick and rolls at times, I will do my whole spiel of we'll see how much Jimmy's really shooting in this series. I said it throughout the entire Celtics series. I'll mention it again here. So I think it's interesting who's the initial defender on Jimmy. I think it might be LeBron, especially if the Lakers go 2 bigs. If the Lakers go 1 big, then I think LeBron goes to Crowder. But when it's 2 bigs out there, you got to put the other big on Crowder, or Davis is on Crowder and the big is on Bam. And I don't really want LeBron chasing around like Duncan Robinson. Not that I don't think he can do it, but more so I want LeBron to have some freedom as a help guy. I mean, if he's on Duncan Robinson, he's just got to stay glued to him. So, LeBron on Jimmy, that could be interesting. It's not going to be like this all the time. I mean, in transition and stuff, there's going to be switches, and there's going to be some casual switching throughout the series as well. So I don't want to get too obsessed with specific matchups. But I think it'll happen sometimes. And I think when Jimmy is just straight up ISOing on LeBron, I think LeBron can guard that pretty well. I actually don't even know if Miami will go to that too often. I mean, sometimes, sure, but I don't think that'll be a mainstay for them. But then the other idea is, so say if Jimmy's getting a screen from Bam, and we'll say it's, I mean, hell, even if it's Dwight on Bam, I think sometimes you could switch that with the idea of then, all right, Dwight just back up, dare Jimmy to take the shot, and if he makes it, then he made it, but at least it wasn't a layup or a foul. The other question then is, well, can LeBron switch on to Bam? Because I think that could happen sometimes too. If Bam is having to deal with LeBron in the post, I think LeBron can guard him. I mean, LeBron is as heavy as Bam, I'm pretty sure. And of course, while all this is happening, you've got Anthony Davis lurking around somewhere for whatever he has to do, and whatever the Lakers have asked him to do so far, he's done it. Now, another thing with Jimmy is mismatch hunting. I think we could see a bit of that from him in this series. The thing is, though, with LeBron, Dwight, and AD on the floor, assuming the Lakers go big like that, and assuming it's Dwight and not JaVale as much, there's not a whole lot of dudes to attack, but there could always be somebody, whether it's Rondo, Danny Green, KCP, Morris, whoever it may be. And we'll have to see if Miami goes into that mode much, because I don't know if Miami is really programmed to just, okay, Jimmy, go find the mismatch and then ISO. It's not really Spoelstra's thing, but it might have to be. I mean, we saw against the Bucks, especially in the 40-point game from Jimmy, that he was mismatch hunting sometimes, and the Bucks were a little apprehensive to switching, which I don't think the Lakers will be as much, and sometimes it might even be to the Lakers' detriment to switch as much as they may on a Jimmy screen with a perimeter player. But then again, as I say that, if Duncan Robinson is in a screen with Jimmy, you might just have to switch, because if you mess around, it could be just Duncan Robinson getting a relatively comfortable 3, and I mean, he can make it if you're right on top of him, so maybe they'll just have to switch that a lot. Could we see the Lakers double teaming some of Miami's ball handlers, Jimmy or Dragic specifically? Hell, could they double team Bam? I don't know if that's out of the question, really. It's a scary game, because then that's when you get Duncan Robinson really moving around, and Hero, a similar thing. Crowder, you're gonna give him that shot. But I guess I wouldn't be shocked if we'd see it. I don't think it would be their mainstay defensively, because I think if you gave Miami enough looks of, oh, they're trapping our ball handlers, they're going to know what to do. I mean, I mentioned earlier the idea of cutting. I think Miami could certainly do that if you're committing 2 guys to 1 guy on the ball. So yeah, have I mentioned the Bam, Dragic pick and roll that much? Who's going to start on Dragic? Is it going to be KCP? Is it going to be Danny Green? I mean, I guess in theory you could put LeBron on Dragic. I just don't think it's going to happen. And how can the Lakers guard that? I mean, the first question is, who is guarding Bam? Is it AD or is it the other big man? Of course, that will be also determined by if there's 1 or 2 bigs on the floor for the Lakers. I mean, besides the obvious stuff of fight over the screen and all that, I think the way the Lakers can guard that is by you have the big drop somewhat, not a super lot. You don't want to just give Dragic an easy, 15-footer. And then you just have another dude, could be LeBron, depending on who he's guarding, run down to kind of slow down Bam's dive. And then while that's going on, Dragic's initial defender is either behind him now, and AD's got his arms flailing around, and you just hope that you freak out Dragic and Bam enough in those couple of seconds to then close out on the guy who LeBron left open. Now, as I've been saying, I think a lot of this does still depend on if the Lakers are going one big or two bigs, because, if it's one big, then I think LeBron slides down to Crowder, and then it all becomes different, and I don't want to take too long trying to speculate all that stuff. But I will say, for the sake of the Dragic-Bam pick and roll, if there's two bigs out there, then Miami could take advantage of one guy who's not as fast. I mean, you could beef up the rim protection, and maybe that's the guy who slides down instead of LeBron, and then you can kind of use LeBron or whoever it may be as the dude who's covering like two shooters at once or whatever. Given how smart Miami is and how good Spoelstra is, and the fact that Duncan Robinson and Tyler Hero are on this team, I think there's room for getting open shots on that sort of thing, but I also give the Lakers a good chance of just scrambling around enough to guard or close out to whoever while still having that extra big make it tough for Bam to just get alley-oops off of Dragic screens all day. Now, if there's only one big out there for the Lakers, I kind of feel like you're doing the same thing. You're just a little smaller, but also a little faster. And depending on which one works more, I don't know. Anyway, I think that's my Lakers guard the Heat spiel. If we talk about how Miami guards the Lakers. So who does Bam guard? Does Bam guard AD? Or does Crowder guard AD? Or does Jimmy guard AD? I don't know. I mean, if you put Bam on AD, I think that's probably your best chance of guarding him one-on-one. I think you're still going to have to bring help, and you're still going to have to maybe try a zone around the AD post-ups to kind of lock up the passing lanes a little bit, so it's not as simple as AD makes a move, guy open in corner. And as I also say with all this, we'll see if the Lakers get any cut action going around the AD post-up. That being said, then that does mean that it's like Crowder on Dwight or something, which means that could be an alley-oop a lot of times. Could also mean you get killed on the offensive glass. And it does also pose the risk of Bam picking up some bad fouls. Now, Bam he's going to see time on AD, there's no doubt. I just don't know if it's going to be every single possession. The other thing it might be able to open up is the idea of Bam being able to free roam a little bit. Because if he's on Dwight, I think there's a way in which I could trust Miami to not get killed on Dwight alley-oops or whatever, and still allow Bam to kind of help out on AD post-ups or LeBron drives and that sort of thing. It's tougher to do it against LeBron than AD, but I think there's potential there. I don't think it's easy, but I think Miami could manage to pull that off a bit. And maybe giving Bam that much freedom to move around is just so devastating that it benefits you more than just sticking him on Anthony Davis. I don't know. At the same time, if AD is just killing whoever you put on him, you might be forced to go with Bam there. Regardless, AD is going to see a lot of people coming at him. It's not going to be one-on-one post-ups, one-on-one face-ups, that sort of thing. I guess the next guy to talk about is LeBron, of course. So, LeBron's going to mismatch hunt. He's going to go at Hero, Robinson, Dragic, Olynyk if he's ever in there. And we'll have to see what Miami does there, whether it's give them the switch and then trust that your help and swarming defense can bother LeBron and then get out to shooters, whether it's you show on the screen to stop LeBron's momentum for a split second and then you try to get, we'll just say it's Tyler Hero, back to whoever his guy was. One thing I keep saying that teams just haven't really done is they could try trapping LeBron. I mean, it's an idea. Like, yeah, he's an amazing passer, but if KCP is setting a screen for LeBron to get whoever switched onto him and you trap, well, now you're dealing with an open Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, which, yeah, sometimes he's still going to beat you, whether it's like a lob to somebody or he's got an open shot, but I mean, if it's like 4 of those possessions rather than 4 possessions of Duncan Robinson trying to guard LeBron, then I'll take it. So we'll see what Miami wants to do there. I imagine the Heat will switch any LeBron screen that involves Bam, Jimmy, and Crowder. Whether that will actually stop LeBron, I don't know. It's also the idea of if Anthony Davis is involved in those, then who is now guarding AD? I mean, if Jimmy or Crowder is on LeBron initially, then that guy is now switched to Anthony Davis if they ran a screen and maybe it's Bam on LeBron, or maybe it was just a Crowder-Jimmy switch because Crowder was on AD initially. I guess you'll just take it if you're the Heat, you know. There were times in the Celtics series where the Celtics just tried to beat Bam in one-on-ones and it never worked. I don't know if LeBron is going to try. I mean, he might have to at times, and I would give him a better chance than anybody to beat Bam in one-on-ones or at least draw contact. I mean, unlike the Celtics dudes, Bam will not overwhelm LeBron physically. They're basically the same size. So we'll see how that goes. Do I give Iguodala or Jimmy or Crowder much of a chance to just defend LeBron in some simpler stuff? No, not really. Do we think LeBron's going to post up like that? This could be the series for it. We saw him bring it out a little bit against the Nuggets in the last game. A little bit. He didn't do it too much. He didn't really need to, but I think at times you can tell early in the game when LeBron has decided, all right, I'm going to post up tonight. And when he decides to go into that mode, no one has dealt with it. So we'll see. I don't think it's going to happen every game, and I won't be shocked if there's a game, maybe 2 games in this series where we're like, man, if LeBron would have just posted up in this one, then they would have won. But I think when he needs to, he will do it. But another thing to think about with LeBron is if they go with the 2 bigs, could that make the paint too packed for them to where even if LeBron is getting the switches he wants and he's beating the guys off the dribble or whatever, that there's not enough room to operate in there? I don't know. I mean, they've done a pretty good job of managing that, but I guess that's something to think about. So for whatever that means, there you go. As far as random things that Miami could try to do to slow down LeBron as well as get out to shooters, could we see a zone? I mean, the Celtics, for all the talk about how the zone bothered the Celtics, they pretty much had it figured out after Game 2, I would say. Their problem was they couldn't defend Miami, really. So, would we see the zone against the Lakers? Well, first off, LeBron is not going to have a problem knowing what to do against a zone. Whether that's attacking it up top, getting a screen, whatever it may be, making the right pass. I think you can put AD in the middle of the floor, and that breaks a lot of the zone because they've got to stick with him. I mean, he's been making 50% of his mid-rangers or whatever that stat was, and those have been pretty contested shots, turnarounds, and the whole thing. So I don't really know if that one's going to work against these guys. I think what some of it's got to be, and I mean, we've been saying this with the Lakers the whole playoffs, and we'll say it now, is you got to dare the Lakers to beat you with shooting. You still have to get an okay closeout. You can't just give them like 7-8 feet of space. But if you can just get an okay enough contest on all these guys who are going to be open off of LeBron and AD stuff, and you get fortunate that they don't shoot 40%, then that's going to be your chance pretty much. I mean, it's too difficult to ask a team to bring a bunch of guys on LeBron and Anthony Davis and then have perfect closeout to shooters. It can't be done. But we have seen the Lakers at times not shoot well in the postseason. Now, it hasn't happened enough for it to be that big of a deal, but it's happened occasionally. Now, I guess one question that is going to be interesting for Miami is, will they go big at any time? Will they go with Olynyk and Bam? Will they go with Myers Leonard and Bam to give themselves a little bit more rim protection? And, well, that would be pretty much it. Maybe they're also getting killed on the glass. I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't bet on it just because Miami really unlocked this level of play for themselves when they stopped playing 2 big guys. So I would imagine that they would want to stick with the more free-flowing 4 perimeter dudes around Bam thing, but maybe they would be forced to. I mean, Spoelstra is a good enough coach to where I don't think he would get too stubborn. I think he would be pretty okay with it. I just don't think that that's going to be their first thing to go to when the Lakers give them some problems. Or for all I know, they're going to start game 1 with Kelly Olynyk at power forward. How the hell should I know? I've gotten a million playoff series wrong in this whole thing. Have I gotten everything I wanted to get to? I think so. Is there going to be some random outlier games like a Duncan Robinson 7 threes game or a Tyler Hero 40-point game where he hits 30-footers over Marcus Smart. Maybe. Same thing could happen on the other side for the Lakers. Maybe KCP goes nuts from 3 one game, or Rondo beating guys off the dribble and then doing that whole thing. Is Iguodala going to rip my heart out and shoot 5 for 5 from 3 in a game in this series? I guess it could happen. If you're the Lakers, you are still going to give him that shot. I mean, you got to play the percentages there. Just comes back to the idea of you got to pick something to give up a little bit. Not as if you're giving a guy 9 seconds to prepare for an open 3, but you know how it goes. NBA defense. So, yeah, I think I'm done. I'm picking the Lakers. You all knew that. As for how many games, I don't know, 5 or 6 probably. And that's that. Like and subscribe if you want to. And yeah.